On a frosty Christmas morning, a grieving millionaire named Charles Whitman visited a humble orphanage to bring gifts and spread some holiday cheer. He had lost his fiancée in a tragic accident years ago, and the holidays had never felt the same since. As he handed out presents, his eyes fell on a young girl who looked strikingly familiar. Her features mirrored those of his late fiancée, down to the sparkling eyes that had once captivated him. Stunned and overwhelmed, Charles felt his heart race. Was it a coincidence, or was fate trying to tell him something? What followed next would forever alter his life, leaving everyone who heard the story in awe. A millionaire visits an orphanage on Christmas and sees a girl identical to his deceased fiancée. Snow drifted softly across the cobblestone streets as Charles Whitman, a reclusive millionaire, stared out of his car window. Despite the festive cheer illuminating the city, Charles felt a hollow emptiness inside. Christmas had never been the same for him since the tragic loss of his fiancée, Eleanor, 5 years earlier. Her untimely death in a car accident had left him devastated. And though he had more wealth than he could ever spend, no amount of money could fill the void she left behind. His chauffeur, Edward, glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "Sir, we're approaching the orphanage now. Are you certain about this visit?" Charles nodded solemnly. The Whitman Foundation often donated to charities during the holiday season, but this year, Charles had decided to deliver the donations himself. He wasn't entirely sure why, but something about the idea of giving personally felt different, perhaps even healing. The car pulled up to the gates of St. Agnes Orphanage, a modest building adorned with simple holiday decorations. As he stepped out, the cold wind bit at his face, but Charles barely noticed. He carried a large bag filled with toys and gifts, a gesture he hoped would bring some joy to the children inside. Inside the orphanage, the atmosphere was lively and warm, a stark contrast to the chilly world outside. Children's laughter echoed through the halls as they played with donated toys, while volunteers bustled about, serving cookies and hot cocoa. Charles was greeted by Sister Margaret, the head of the orphanage, whose kind smile radiated genuine gratitude. "Mr. Whitman, we're honored to have you here," she said, shaking his hand. "The children will be thrilled to meet you." Charles smiled faintly. "The honor is mine, sister. I'm glad I could contribute to their Christmas." As he moved through the room, handing out gifts and chatting briefly with the children, he felt a faint warmth begin to stir in his chest. Their smiles were infectious, their joy uncontainable. It was the closest he had felt to happiness in years. Then, as he approached the far corner of the room, his eyes caught something, or rather, someone that made him freeze. A young girl, no older than 8, sat quietly by the Christmas tree, holding a small, worn teddy bear. She had golden curls that framed her delicate face, and her wide blue eyes held a depth of emotion that seemed far beyond her years. But what struck Charles most was how eerily she resembled Eleanor. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. The girl looked up, and their eyes met. She smiled shyly, and Charles felt his heart skip a beat. "Who is she?" he asked Sister Margaret, his voice barely above a whisper. The nun followed his gaze and smiled warmly. "That's Lily. She's one of our quieter children, but she has a heart of gold. She's been with us for about 2 years now." Charles couldn't take his eyes off the girl. "Do you know anything about her family?" Sister Margaret's expression grew somber. "Not much, I'm afraid. She was found abandoned at a park. No one ever came forward to claim her." Charles felt a strange connection to the girl, one he couldn't explain. As if drawn by some invisible force, he walked over to her. Lily looked up at him, her eyes curious but not afraid. "Hello," he said softly. "What's your name?" "Lily," she replied, clutching her teddy bear tighter. "What's yours?" "Charles," he said, kneeling to her level. "That's a lovely bear you have there." "It was my mommy's," she said, her voice tinged with a sadness that tugged at his heart. "She told me to keep it safe before she went away." Charles felt a lump rise in his throat. "She must have loved you very much." Lily nodded. "I think so, but I don't remember her face." For reasons he couldn't comprehend, Charles found himself wanting to know more about this child. Over the next hour, he stayed by her side, listening as she told him about her favorite books, the games she liked to play, and how she sometimes dreamed of having a family. "She's quite taken with you," Sister Margaret remarked later, as Charles prepared to leave. Charles hesitated. "Would it be possible for me to visit her again?" The nun looked surprised but pleased. "Of course. The children could use more visitors like you." Over the following weeks, Charles found himself returning to the orphanage regularly, his visits becoming the highlights of his otherwise lonely days. Each time, he spent hours with Lily, their bond growing stronger. She reminded him so much of Eleanor, not just in appearance, but in her kindness, her curiosity, and her quiet strength. One day, as they sat together reading a storybook, Lily turned to him and asked, "Why do you come here, Mr. Charles?" He paused, taken aback by the question. "Because I enjoy spending time with you," he said honestly. "Do you think," she began hesitantly, "you could be my family?" Her words hit him like a bolt of lightning. He had been dancing around the thought for weeks, afraid to acknowledge it. But now, hearing her say it out loud, he knew it was what he wanted. "I would like that very much, Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The adoption process was not without its challenges. As a single man with a demanding career, Charles faced scrutiny from the authorities. But he was determined, and with the help of Sister Margaret and his legal team, he finally brought Lily home just in time for the new year. Their first days together were a whirlwind of adjustment and discovery. Lily brought light and laughter into Charles's grand, lonely mansion, transforming it into a home. And for Lily, who had spent years feeling unwanted, Charles became the loving father she had always dreamed of. As the months passed, their bond deepened. Charles introduced Lily to the things Eleanor had loved: music, painting, and gardening, and in doing so, he found himself healing from his own grief. One evening, as they sat in the garden watching the sunset, Lily asked, "Do you think my mommy would be happy that I found you?" Charles smiled, his heart full. "I think she'd be very proud of you, Lily. And I think Eleanor would be proud of me too." Their journey together wasn't always easy, but it was filled with love, growth, and the kind of happiness neither of them had thought they would find again. Years later, as Charles watched Lily graduate from college, he couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. She had grown into a confident, compassionate young woman, and he had found a renewed purpose in life through being her father. Their story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love and connection could light the way forward. And though Eleanor's absence was still felt, Charles knew she had played a part in guiding him to Lily. Together, they had created a new family, one built on resilience, trust, and the unshakable belief that life could always be